This is Gabriella Santos. She is an LMC alum, LMC Marketing Department intern, LMC Marketing Department student worker. So Gabriella, welcome. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gabriella. I worked with John for quite a while, and it's so cool that I get to go full circle and I'm on the other side, and I'm being one of the people who talk in classes, which is so cool. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, John, for having me.
What did you do after you left us here at
What did I
LMC?
do? I transferred to Sac State and I got my BFA at Sac State. I transferred to Sac State, and throughout the whole time I was taking classes, I was also freelancing on the side, just to add to my resume, create new things, also make some extra cash, which was nice as a college student. Yeah.
So you worked, where did you work when you were going to Sac State?
I worked at Dipsy, which is a startup company in San Francisco. And they are a sexual wellness app where they create audio stories, and I would create their illustrations for the stories and ads for them, and also managing their social media, creating posts and graphics for their Instagram stories, Facebook, all that.
Cool. And then after Dipsy, you worked where?
I worked at Tatcha, which is a cosmetics company based in San Francisco. And they are in Sephora and online, and it's makeup and skincare based on the geishas in Japan. So that was really fun. I'm sure some of you know of it at Sephora. Yeah, that was fun.
What were you doing for them?
I was creating a lot of emails and their ads and their website banners, and social media stuff too there. Yeah.
And what do you do now?
I now work at a company called Olympics. I didn't plan this, guys. I'm sorry. I work at Olympics, which is a mental health company, and we create digital therapeutics for kids. Well, not kids, it's 13 to 22. And it's a new form of therapy where you work with your provider, your therapist or your doctor, and they prescribe the application to you to help you through your mental health journey.
When going through school and knowing what you know now, what things should you pay attention to when you're taking your classes?
Things I would pay attention to is really learn as much as you can and ask a bunch of questions. I don't think I took in that full opportunity and just got my work done and would leave class and do the homework. But if you really dedicate yourself to really learning an application and asking questions of how this functions or how it relates to the real world, when you're in math class, you're like, when am I going to use this? You can ask questions in design of what are the tools I'm most likely going to use. And when you work with other people, you'll find a million ways to do one type of thing. So collaborating, asking questions, working with others is the most you can do while you're in school. Networking is really important.
What does UI UX mean to you?
Yeah, so UX UI, I think it can be used in both a helpful and a harmful way. And it boils down to the true purpose of why you're creating what you're creating. It's important to me to create work and work with companies that have the same values that I do and has a positive impact on the world. And there's examples of bad UX and bad UI. For instance, Instagram and TikTok, they target young demographics, and they use the psychology behind design to create a platform that has an infinite loop or an infinite scroll of information, which leads to people comparing themselves to others, or just down a rabbit hole of wasting your time into this void, and it negatively impacts your mental health. But that's how these companies make their money, is keeping you on their apps. And so I think that's a way to use UI in a bad way. But there are some ways you can use it in a good way, an alarm clock. It helps you wake up. It's so simple, but it's such a small function that helps people. And then it can get as complex as the UI that doctors use in the hospital to keep track of their patients. So there are pros and cons of what you want to use it for. It all depends on where you want to be and what you want to be creating and the purpose behind it. And there's actually a show on Netflix, I don't know if anyone's heard of it, it's called The Social Network. And they actually talk about how some companies use design to manipulate the information you consume and how it makes you want to buy certain things, or how it affects your thought process on certain topics and where you stand with certain things.
So is UI scary?
It can be, but it can also be super rewarding and fulfilling. And where I work now in my company, seeing the work that we do and knowing that it's going to help people in the future and kids in the future with their mental health is so fulfilling to me. Like, I wish when I was younger there were apps that could do this. And the reason why this is such a new industry of digital therapeutics is because people are always on their phones. If you look at your screen time, I'm sure you spend at least like 4 to 8 hours on average the person spends on their phone. And
Per day?
yeah, per day. Isn't that like
No.
a crazy amount? Yeah. It's a lot. You could do a full-time job on your phone.
Wow, just being on your phone.
Yeah. So I think if there's a way where you can make an application that benefits people instead of pulls them away from things that are important, it can be used in a really good way. Yeah. So don't be scared of it.
What was that?
Don't be scared of it, but like be
Okay.
conscious about the design efforts that companies put into making people do what they want you to do.
In your current job or in your previous jobs, how did you use UI UX specifically?
I use it all the time. Like in my job now and my previous jobs, I've always used the way of thinking about how a user or someone engaging with my designs, how their thought process is. And I think you need to do that with ads or social media stuff, websites. If it's not functional and people don't know how to intuitively use it, they're not going to remember it. They're not going to want to use it. And so what's the point of designing it? There's no function to it. Like when you look at your screen, you close a window, you just know it's the X button. But if that was not an X, it was like a 0 or an O, you'd be like, what is it? What do I do? Yeah, it's confusing, but that is an example of good UI and UX. And you want to create designs that people know how to engage with and they know what direction they're supposed to be taking, but also not in a manipulative way where like, okay, let's design an infinite scroll for people so they never see the end of their Instagram feed. And that's why they call it a feed, because they just continuously feed you and you never know when to stop.
So what about tips that you would give new designers? Some simple sort of tricks in the trade.
Some tips I think would be to definitely create work you're passionate about. If you're not passionate about it, don't do it. I've fallen victim to being like, okay, I'll do this freelance project, even though I'm not really passionate about it because of, I was a college student, I needed money. But truly, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're not going to have fun designing. And that takes away from the whole experience of why you're doing what you do. And I also think that you should be open to feedback and learning from other people. That's like one of the top things I could ever tell someone in design is to always ask for feedback and always ask how to be a better designer, how to make something function better. That's the best way to learn. Yeah.
Okay. Did you take classes in UI UX?
I did. We did do that at Site State. We created an application where people could easily order juice, the kind of juice they wanted. It's kind of like, what is it called? It's like a pressed juicery. They have an app. We created a fun little app as a project, but then we could also work on a fun little project, which I decided to do is create during like the heat of the pandemic. People would wait outside stores before they could get in, and it was hot in the summer. So I was like, what if they made an app where, well, it's connected to their main app or an integration into their app where you could arrive at the parking lot and you would be given a number, or there would be signage telling you, oh, if you're here and you want to get in line, you can wait in your car, just text this number and it'll tell you when you're ready to come in, when it's your time to come in, instead of waiting in long looping lines out in the sun to go into a store. Now that wouldn't be really necessary. Everyone can just walk in. But at that time, those are the kind of solutions a designer thinks of, how to make life easier for other people. And that's a way you could make good UX UI.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you see the future of UI UX going? How much scarier do you think it's going to get?
Honestly, with UX UI, the industry is growing. Like, it's not even reached anywhere near its peak. There's always going to be a need for creative minds and people creating new things to solve problems and make life easier for people. And I used to doubt myself as a designer and be like, well, why am I a designer? Why would I be a designer? Who would want to hire me? I just graduated or something. And then I realized no one designs how I design it. And maybe you have the idea that no one else is going to come up with, and that's what the industry needs. So you have value in everything you create. And that's
we're all individuals in design. In design.
Yeah. It's a bunch of
our voice.
And it's so fun to work with other designers and just brainstorm back and forth ideas, because it's just limitless, the things you could come up with. It's really cool.